From Amateur Radio Newsline Report number 2285, this is Ham Nation Headlines for Wednesday, August 18th, 2021. In Northern California, nearly 1 month after its flames began, the Dixie Fire has become the second largest wildfire in the state's history. One group of radio amateurs stepped up to keep the lines of communications open for local firefighters when communications failed.
The Lake Almanor Emergency Radio Net was on the air, trading real-time information with one another and neighbors. Hams were monitoring 7.199 megahertz and conducting their emergency net on 147.42 simplex. They also jumped in to help the Peninsula Fire Department troubleshoot their problems when the main firehouse radio failed, along with repeater issues. Mark Burnham, K6FEJ, one of the net's members, said that modified 2-meter radios had to be installed in the fire chief's vehicle for backup and at the firehouse crew's quarters. The Hams also set up a scanner on the main fire frequency near the firefighters' sleeping quarters so that they would be able to hear calls. By the middle of the second week of August, the Dixie Fire was declared the largest wildfire burning in the United States. It had already destroyed nearly 500,000 acres and was only 21% contained. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Randy Sly, W4XJ.
The music world and the amateur radio world are both grieving the loss of a friend.
Robert Ringwald, K6YBV, was a lifelong amateur radio operator who also made his mark in the jazz world as a jazz ambassador and co-organizer in 1974 of California's first Sacramento Jazz Festival, where his band was a headliner. A professional jazz pianist, he was also an enthusiastic radio amateur. First licensed in 1957, he soon became adept in CW, which he identifies on his QRZ page as his most frequent mode. Bob became a silent key on August 3rd. He was especially proud of his daughter, actress Molly Ringwald, and took great pains to keep things authentic when she portrayed an amateur radio operator in one episode of the NBC sitcom The Facts of Life. Bob wrote, "Naturally, the writers had Molly's lines all wrong. I volunteered to write the ham talk to be authentic, and they gratefully accepted." Molly also used her father's call sign in that episode. With his passing, Amateur Radio Newsline has also lost a friend. Bob Ringwald was a frequent contributor of story ideas that listeners have heard each week. He died at the age of 80. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Ralph Squillaci, KK6ITB.
A firm co-founded by a radio amateur has just merged with a technology giant, SpaceX.
SpaceX, Elon Musk's giant California-based space technology company, has acquired a satellite communications company co-founded by an amateur radio operator. The merger makes Swarm Technologies a wholly owned subsidiary of SpaceX. Swarm, which specializes in Internet of Things technology and low-cost satellite connectivity, has asked the Federal Communication Commission to transfer control of its Earth and space station licenses. Swarm was founded in 2016 by Ben Longmire, KF5KMP, and Sarah Spangelo. In 2020, the company launched its first dozen commercial satellites, established ground stations in Alaska, New Jersey, Washington State, Guam, the Azores, and elsewhere, and began expanding market access. Swarm is licensed in non-voice, non-geostationary mobile satellite service, operating in the bands between 137 to 138 megahertz and 148 to 149.95 megahertz. In 2020, Swarm Technologies placed second in the most innovative space companies list created by Fast Company. The top spot went to SpaceX. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Sel Emby, KB3 TZD.
And that's all from the Amateur Radio Newsline, your independent source for amateur radio news for 4 decades and counting at arnewsline.org. With Randy Sly, W4XJ, Ralph Squillaci, KK6ITB, Sel Emby, KB3TZD, Karen Eve Murray, KD2GUT, at the News Desk in New York, and our news team across the globe. I'm Don Wellbanks, AE5DW. 7-3. We'll see you next time here on Ham Nation.